Hi, this is Kavura. Everyone knows that I'm an avid reader of Star Trek books. So I want to talk about these two Star Trek Enterprise novels that I just read. Now, Enterprise is not one of the shows that I've read a lot of novels for, so this is kind of new for me. So we have The Good That Men Do, and then the follow-up to that was called Kobayashi Maru. And these are both by two writers, Andy Mangels and Michael A. Martin. And I've read some of their books before, and they're pretty good writers. They're a pretty good team together. So these two books are actually building up to the Romulan War, which was another set of two novels that the same authors wrote. So The Good That Men Do came out in 2007, takes place, well, the main story of it takes place in the year 2155. Now these books are part of the relaunch of the Enterprise books, so it's after the show was canceled, and these are events that happened after the show was over. And it starts with, now this is pretty cool, they have Jake and Nog in the 24th century, and that's basically the Jake and Nog story is the frame story where they are just finding out about things that happened during Enterprise time. What happened was some of the Starfleet records just got declassified, so now they're finding out things about history that they didn't know, or some things that they thought about history turn out to be wrong. For example, the last episode of Enterprise was the one where Riker and Troy were on the holodeck, and they said that Trip had died on a mission. Well, what Jake and Nog find out is that Trip didn't really die at that time. He actually lived a long time after that. And then the book tells the story of this. And I can say this is not really a spoiler because this happens at the beginning of this book. We find out that Trip actually faked his death, so most people thought he died, but he actually lived and went on a secret mission to Romulus, which was pretty cool. Let me say I love this book. I like how, first I like the idea that they brought Trip back to life, because I didn't like the idea that he died so soon. What was that? Really? Trip is one of the best characters on the show. So Trip actually became an agent of Section 31, the way Reed had been. So Trip was doing his thing on Romulus, and of course, like I said, these books are leading up to the Romulan War, so the Romulans are in this, and they actually have scenes that take place on Romulus, which is cool because I've always loved the Romulans and Romulan stories. And they have, the books have several characters from the show, such as Minister Samuels, the one that was Prime Minister of Earth, and Shran, of course, the Andorian, and Admiral Valdor, who was the Romulan that we saw on Enterprise that was in charge of the drones, the secret drone thing that the Romulans were doing. But the show does still keep with canon, because most people still do not know what the Romulans look like. They don't know yet that the Romulans look like Vulcans, because we know that they're not supposed to find out until the TOS episode Balance of Terror. But we are finding out that, well, maybe, there are some Vulcans that work for the Vulcan security, the Vashar, and maybe some of them secretly do know what the Romulans look like. And there are some Romulans that know what the Vulcans look like. But these things are kept secret because, the Vulcans are already hated by Andorians. So, the Andorians would really get off on them if they found out that Romulans are an offshoot of Vulcans. The Romulans are still being very aggressive. They still have they're working on new technology. They had their cloaked minefields back during Enterprise, and they're still working on cloaking a whole ship, but they still don't have that technology working yet. But they're still working on new technology, trying to make their ships faster and better, and other things. There's also the Coalition of Planets, which is something they are about to sign, which is like the United Federation of Planets, but they're not quite there yet with the United Federation of Planets. Right now, they're calling it the Coalition of Planets, And what they have at the beginning of the book is Earth, Vulcan, Andor, Tellar, and Corridon. You remember Corridon was a planet they had on Enterprise and was mentioned on the TOS episode Journey to Babel. And we've seen some Corridons on Discovery now. So at that time, they had 5 founding members that were intending to sign the Coalition of Planets, but you'll see what happens there. And so this book is continued into the next book, which is called Kobayashi Maru. Now the book, first of all, there is another Star Trek book called Kobayashi Maru. I think the difference is the other one was called The Kobayashi Maru. But it was a TOS book and has nothing to do with this one. So for this one, that is an Enterprise book, the name Kobayashi Maru in this book is actually a ship. It's a freighter ship, not a Starfleet ship. And we all know that the Kobayashi Maru test is something that Starfleet gives to cadets. It was first mentioned in Star Trek II. I believe at the time that this is supposed to take place, Starfleet doesn't have that test yet, the Kobayashi Maru, because it isn't mentioned. So I'm assuming like later on when Starfleet starts having that test, they'll decide to probably name it after this ship that's in this story. So on this ship, they do have a first officer whose name is Arturo Styles. Styles? Now that's a familiar name. He probably is related to the Lieutenant Styles that was in the episode Balance of Terror. We do know that Styles said that he had an ancestor that served during the Romulan War. Now this particular Styles is not in Starfleet. He's a civilian working on this freighter ship. But he said that he's just about the only person in his family that's not in Starfleet. He's got several family members in Starfleet. So that sounds like they're setting up something like to keep counting, like, okay, we know there's going to be lots of people named Styles during the Romulan War. And wouldn't you know that the Praetor at this time, now the Praetor is not really in the book, but they do say his name. His name is Praetor Dideradix. Now that's another interesting name. So it must be that he was such a good Praetor that later on the Romulans decided to name their class of their warbirds after him. And now this one didn't have a frame story like the previous book did. It just all takes place in about the same year, 2155. This one does have the USS Columbia, which was the Enterprise's sister ship with Captain Erica Hernandez. Now the Klingons are in this one, which is cool, and it still has the Romulans. And another thing in this one is Travis Mayweather's old ship, the Horizon, which was his, it was a freighter ship that he was raised on, grew up on with his family. And his brother, we saw this from the Enterprise show, his brother Paul is now in command of that ship. And his mother, Rihanna, is the chief engineer on the ship. So this ship does appear in the book, even though Travis Mayweather doesn't get to see his family. But there's a scene with that ship, the Horizon. And so remember the episode, A Piece of the Action? And they in that episode, they actually said that it was a ship called the Horizon that went to that planet 100 years ago and left a book there called Chicago's Ganglands of the 1920s, and left the book there and basically contaminated the planet because it was planet Sigma Iosha. The Ioshians are just very imitative, and so they created a whole culture around the Chicago Ganglands just from that book. So now in this story, the Horizon actually is the same Horizon that was mentioned in that episode. But the book doesn't really say that the planet. They don't say the planet's name. What they say is the system. They call it Gamma Hydra. But you know it's the planet. They say that so the Horizon needs to have some repairs done, and they need certain metals, certain things to repair the ship. And they go to this planet, and they make first contact, but they're not Starfleet, and Starfleet didn't have rules about first contact at this time anyway. But the people at the planet are willing to trade some things they have that could help the Horizon in exchange for a few Earth, like just nostalgic trinkets and things that they have. And so one of the things that Paul Mayweather gives the minister of the planet is a box of books, and one of the books is something about Chicago gangs, and he said the minister of the planet was really interested in that book. And then it also turns out that his mother at the time didn't know he gave away that box of books, but that Chicago book was her favorite book. So, and she didn't know at the time that he gave it away. So anyway, but that was just a funny scene. So it's just really cool. And there's more that happens with that. I didn't tell you everything. So it was an interesting little dig there. I mean, a great reference to the canon that we know, and to Paul and the Vashar. Some of that comes up, and Sopek. There is a Vulcan named Sopek on Enterprise that appears in both of these books. So all of there's a lot of references to the show and a lot of characters that the show used that are also in the books. But I would say you don't really have to remember all the characters to enjoy the books. The book explains enough about who they are that you can still follow the book and enjoy it. I did really enjoy both of these books. I think they're wonderful books. I love the way they handled the characters and the way Trip was, missing his friends because he had to be away from them, and he really didn't know if he would survive his mission. So it was very heartfelt in that way, and it still showed the bond, the telepathic bond between Trip and T'Pol. And T'Pol was very worried about him too, as you'll find out, because they still had that bond. And there's a lot about Archer on the Enterprise and what he's having to put up with, trying to. He sees the Romulan. There are these covert Romulan attacks, which they can't really even prove that it's Romulans. But Archer has the gut feeling. He knows it is, but he still keeps being sent on these other missions instead of finding out what the Romulans are doing, because we know that these books are setting up for war. And it is just great characterizations, the way it handles everything and all of the plots and the build-up and everything. So I highly recommend these books as Enterprise books and just as fun books for everything. And also the Romulan. Actually, the books actually use Romulan and Klingon words, which they put in italics, but it looks like that it's actually using authentic words from whatever reference you can find these languages. I mean, of course, the Klingon language is developed, and they have several Klingon words in here, and even Andorian words. And the Romulan words look like they come from. A lot of it comes from the Rihansu, from the Diane Duane Romulan books, which is really cool. He's using a lot of familiar stuff there. The way the words are spelled and everything, it just looks authentic to those of us who have read a lot of these Star Trek books in the past. So, great books. I highly recommend these, and I can't wait to read The Romulan War next. Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.